So, hello everybody. Today I have a very special lecture. I'm an artist that spent a decade creating a science fiction world, and the name of the lecture is Inside 44, 10 Years of Art and World Design. I have, as I already said, spent a decade creating this world. The world is called Inside 44, and if you go to its website, which you can find in the links on this YouTube video, you will be able to read about it, to check what happened during those 10 years, what comes in a package. Inside 44 is the only handcrafted 588 pages illustrated science fiction encyclopedia created by one designer over a decade. I have poured my soul into this, and I will start with the lecture shortly. I want to tell you that if you decide, you can buy there one book or all three as a bundle, because there is 3 books of 580 pages illustrated. Not only that, Inside 44 is available for licensing as IP to be developed further. If anybody is interested in that, you can check all on the link in this YouTube video. But let's start with this presentation. First of all, you need to know who I am. My name is Darko Markovic. In art and design world, I am known as Darmar, and I'm a concept designer, futurist, thinker, art director, industrial designer. I design anything from pen to spaceship. I'm known for amazing vehicles done in 3D, 2D, it doesn't matter what client needs. And as long as it looks good, as I like to say also. So the latest clients, some of them that I worked are Sony, Amazon MGM Studios, Double Negative. And the latest I was a lead vehicle concept artist on Masters of the Universe that was released in theater June 5th, 2026. But what is this story about? To understand how this started in 2015 and it took over a decade, we need to go 20 years back. 2006, when I finished high school, I wanted to be a designer, specifically a car designer to be exact. But my father wanted me to be something with math, so we came to the conclusion that architecture is the best choice. And I tried to enter architecture and I was unfortunately rejected. Then I tried to enter a university for arts and design and I was told I have no talent. In the next 5 years I would work incredibly hard, get many awards through Europe, Asia and USA, more than 10 of them international awards for industrial design and concept. That led to getting the biggest award, and that's Lamborghini scholarship, where I went to Italy, Milan, and 2011 economic crisis was catching up and I was kicked out literally. And then I worked as an intern in one company and was again removed, which led to 2015 where I was without money, without anything. And I came back to my parents, which could provide me the money, but that was not the life I wanted. I wanted something bigger. And then I said to myself in 2015, I want to make something so big the world can't ignore me anymore, no matter where I'm from. Everybody thought I was insane, which is quite normal in these situations. I would be surprised if it was different. And I started actually to work on this in my free time and tried to build my career. And I left this in Serbian. But what's written here is that story was already written in my head. It was just waiting to become real. And I would translate my real life experiences into this, and I was never aware how big this would become. So let me bring you to this universe. I have separated the lecture in 3 parts. The first part is storytelling. The second is visual architecture and logistics and marketing, because when you're world building you go through 3 stages, and I went through them with over a decade as I was working. Many people ask why logistics marketing. Part of it because it will present you what I went through as a citizen of third world country and how much effort was needed there to make systems for payment and everything, but also it will give you input how you can world build your world and world build it better so you can optimize it for logistics and marketing when time comes. The first, we have inspiration, world map, story, backstories of the character, and mind maps. This is writing part. I will be talking in a whole lecture a lot about mind maps, so you can, maybe for somebody it would be beneficial to use them. Let's start from inspiration. Everything was based on my real life. I was born and raised in Belgrade. I changed the country 3 times, not because I changed the location, but because my countries fell apart. First I was Yugoslavenian, then I was Yugoslavenian 2.0, then I was Serbian and Montenegrin, and eventually I became Serbian. So as the country was shrinking more and more and separating in this part of the world, I got that. Serbians are known, or actually all ex-Yugoslavenians mostly are known for great sportsmen. I would use that. There is rich heritage of the Serbia. Serbia is one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a very rich culture. Everything that happens here was also interesting because we had protests and stuff like that on a scale that don't happen very often in the world. I'm also, you need to know, type 1 diabetic. I developed type 1 at the age of 13, and my experience with my design also would be all put in science fiction, but it would sound much cooler when I fix it, as I like to say. So inspiration is separated, the story was separated in 2 parts, but it all started with diabetes. The left was Yugoslavia fall, politics, friends, conflicts, they would go in that category. And on the right was my life. Italy, Lamborghini scholarship, kicked out, burnout, recovery, and new meaning of my life, where I'm gonna head with it. As I said, please do prepare for a lot of mind maps. There is a lot of them, because to be a successful writer, designer, or creative person in general, you need to think a lot. Writing, designing, sketching, anything that you do requires a lot of mind maps, and I always like to say that's 15% of our work. The rest is thinking. So when it starts with the maps, I thought it like this. When I was creating Inside 44, I followed the logic of if evolution or God, whatever you believe in, created the world, they didn't create stories. They created an environment where stories can be told. That's why I created specifically a universe map first, because it was very important for me to have a map where I can move around, and while I write and design and place everything, it was literally like a house on which I would start building other houses, so I make a coexisting environment where everything can work. So the maps were, this map exact has 16,000 pixels, a lot of planets, a lot of quadrants, but everything when I'm doing it has to have a logic. In this case, I separate it in quadrants. When you first look at the map, you can't see anything, but when I describe it, it gets a completely new look. The first quadrant for me would be where the main story is happening. All the main things would happen there as we are evolving the story. The second 2 quadrants would be where I can spread the story. We go left, we go right with the story and introduce new things. But the conflict would happen in a 4th quadrant, because I would move you there throughout the story, and that's when I can introduce you into something completely fresh, so the viewer and the reader is shocked a little bit. And the 5th quadrant was somewhere where I would pull this story, just mention it, and for the next chapters I can open that chapter and tell the story more. I honestly will immediately tell you, from my side, I don't know if the next story will happen, because this project ate too much of my time and I don't have it anymore. I have to work for clients. So if you look now at all the lines and everything, you will realize that they are interconnected with this. As I was creating the map, they are not just put there. They have a meaning, they have a function, they have a story where we go through. And eventually we had a map that has 16,000 pixels, and every pixel we will put story or art or design or something will happen, and we can trace these lines back and check what's happening. The main conflict, or the main story, I wanted it to revolve around humans, and I wanted to have conflict between 2 planets. That was of course inspired by Yugoslavia. In this story, I didn't make any country presented in a bad way. And I need always to say this, because for me that was very important, because for me Yugoslavia is a very great place, and I travel a lot around, I meet different people, and I felt that something is off. When I say off, there is always a worry between these two people until they'll start to travel. But then I pulled out the real enemy that's on the side. And Yugoslavia people will understand this. For non-Yugoslavia people, this will be something completely new. So, how is creative work created? In an age of monitors, flat screens, displays, tablets, mobile phones, we keep forgetting the words. To create something, whether it's a story, whether it's a design, whether it's an art, whether it's a movie, everything starts with a thought. But this in-between part, words, is where we start to shape it. I use a lot of pen and paper because it has completely different vibe and energy than monitor or display tablet. There is something about it that is magical, and I advise always people to use more of paper and to use their hand, because there is something magical happening there. And then out of those words, the design starts to create. For story, I used the Darmar story circle. If you're not familiar with it, I strongly recommend you read it. It's for world building amazing. His story circle from Rick and Morty's 8-step narrative framework used to structure episodes. And he simplified. It forces characters from comfort zone through a transformative, often damaging adventure before returning to changed. And this structure is remarkable, and I used it for my story. I'm not going to go through much, but Matthew grows up in a prosperous world where humanity thrives across Earth and Mars. Matthew develops diabetes, the first case in centuries. You may ask why, but if you follow this circle, you will realize how the story revolves, and if you decide to get the book, that's exactly what you're going to read. So I was writing a lot, and it was very uncomfortable because I'm not a writer, I'm a designer. During that writing, I realized that my characters, as I was optimizing everything over map, my characters wouldn't be just illustrated. I wanted my characters to have a backstory, to have their strength, endurance, speed, intelligence, agility lined up. So when I line them up in a single row, I can see who's where depending from the story, and I can adjust it, and they would have special skill sets. It's literally a character from a game or a movie, but more specifically game, which has its own unique vibe. And this was very important because it was building a lore. Whole lore was happening out of this. This is something I invented when I'm telling a backstory of the character. So I have character maps, story, and all of that gives me visual architecture. So there is always two of them talking with each other. If you have a map, the story is happening there. If you have a character, the character can create a map. If you have a story, the story can influence the character, or vice versa. All of them can work. And I was always using two of these segments to create the character and its story and how it speaks. For me, in the world building and concept art, this is really helpful because I had a pattern where I can go with it. So the first part I explained you, it was about the story. Now we start with visual architecture. We have characters, we have assets, support elements, vehicles, scenes architecture, and branding. All of these make a visual architecture. Let's do a mind map. To make a character, I was taking inspiration from real life, from people I knew. It was defining their backstories, and I would use something called accented balance, which I use a lot in my work. What is accented balance? Accented balance is when something obvious you switch, or something that's non-obvious you accent it. And this would give the visual function, visual look. And immediately I needed to decide whether I'm going 2D or 3D, because the world was very big and complex, and this had to be done logistically. So when I'm making the scenes, everything can be optimized. So let's see one example. Okay, I said this. They were immediately developed either 2D or 3D, depending if they're going in scenes and how much they are seen. This is one of the characters. So let's see. Tiny the elephant, one of the characters that people love. He was inspired by my friend Pera. Pera is very stubborn and charismatic. I say it's strange just to annoy him a little bit. But here is the thing, most trivial things get to him. If somebody entered the room now with a gun, started to shoot, Pera would be the calmest person in the room. He's also big, 2 meters and 10. By the way, Serbians are very big people. And I said, this is so funny because if somebody shot a gun, Pera would be annoyed, just annoyed, and he would be calm. But if we don't call him on a gathering night, when we are all hanging out, he would think about it for days. It would insult him. And it was such a funny way. And I said, okay, such a big person, he has to be tough and funny at the same. And I said that there is a possibility of doing something like this. I wrote his backstory so readers can see who he is. I mentioned also his girlfriend, Maria. I promised her I will do that. And I will read you. Left bleeding and on the brink of death, Tiny faced his mortality, but his owner, Maria Ying, managed to acquire a rare serum that saved him. Okay. So the Tiny had eventually this design, and it was the illustration of him as a dwarfish elephant, and people really love him. There is one thing that's called energy. Everybody talks today about chakras, energy and stuff like that, but energy is just emotion in the motion. So all of his emotion was translated in emotion through this design, and we got the character that is really loved by people. And let's see what I said about it. So I'm not gonna play too much this video. You have Inside 44 documentary, 10 years one man world building, which shows you through 1 hour. I'm talking a lot about creation of this. If you want to watch it, you can get it on my YouTube. But eventually what happened was that Pera was designed in 3D because he was so loved. I used Blender for this, and I had to learn about rigging, and I had to learn about optimization. As a concept designer, this was a little bit hard, but eventually we had him, and he was eventually created as a toy also. Pera loves that toy, and Tiny is really loved as a character, and as I said, energy in the motion is what created it so lovable. Eventually this was Tiny the Elephant, inspired by Pera. Backstory, skills, and so on. And on the next character, you will see a little bit different approach when I was creating characters. So the story of this character, Brand the Mechanic, I had character in the story which was wise, and he was calm, good authority. He was like a professor, soldier, healer, huge man in armor, and he was leading the main character throughout the story. But I had nobody which would inspire it. And I needed someone which could inspire the character, but there was nobody. So when I started doing logistics, it's funny how the universe works. I met Branislav and Brana, and he helped me tremendously. Brana is a great guy. It was a shock because we met over Reddit by accident, and now we are friends. And we talk all the time. He was amazing, and he helped me a tremendous amount and didn't ask anything in return, and I decided to put him as a character because he fit perfectly the role. His backstory, the design of the character was designed in a manner where it was inspired by other person before. And I would sketch these sketches, and I call these sketches flat sketches, and that's where I explore the personality or character of the design. Very fast, I analyze the surfaces and everything, and I call that flat sketching. Oh, I almost said fat, I don't know why, my apologies. And that flat sketching, when you finish it, you will realize when you see this, the final sketch and the initial sketch, is that all the surfaces are very flat. Especially you can see that on the arm. But when you start to finish the sketch, the concept of a character, you will see that it's getting volume and curves. That's what makes a great sketch, and that's what improves it a lot. So volume, adding the volume, it's what improves your designs tremendously in today's world, where everybody is speeding and doing the flat. And eventually we had 2.5D because the design was not supposed to have a lot of scenes, and this would save me a lot of time with logistics, and we got Brand the Mechanic. So Io, codename Brana, this is his page, and he's a character in Inside 44. There are many different kind of characters, different kind of approaches, but mostly they're all similar to ones that I showed you. We have humans, we have aliens, we have robots and mechanical beings. All of this, if you get the books, you can read about them and analyze them. But when I finished the illustrations of the characters, I said to myself, I don't just want the characters. I want them to have their assets designs. So we had a story. It had to tell the story. It had to define the initial function, and we need to develop the function. And then we have the passes and renders. So let's see how this looks when we are creating the asset. This is a Mars and Earth soldier. It's not. There are some characters that wear this armor, but this is literally an asset because you have it multiple times happening without the personality. What I mean by that? This is an asset that contributes to the story when the armies are fighting. We always start with the initial blockout in Blender, and the initial blockout in Blender is where I define the main shapes. The second pass is where the functions are already working, and I'm starting to add a little bit more function and detail. And the third pass is optimizing all of that. The last pass is posing the character, giving it a rig so I can move it in the scene. All of this, you can see it in the video. And in the video, you can see how we go from the initial design where we are making a function, shapes and everything, and translating into a functionable 3D model that can be maybe even later printed. Because these characters appeared a lot throughout the story, they had to be designed in 3D. Also, I must say that I enjoyed quite a lot doing this, because there was something very fun creating small surfaces like this and optimizing the character. And eventually even the details, the hand grenades, the touchpads and so on were designed on it. And yeah, that's the final design. The final design looked like this. That's without the rendering and without the shading. But it shows exactly what I wanted to have, and that's an asset that's remarkable in the story. Let's check another asset. This time a weapon. Hana assault rifle. This time we start with 2D. We started with a sketch, then we designed in 2.5D, as I like to say, because I sketch a lot over the existing 3D that I created. Gives me what is great when you are doing sketch over 3D is that you already have the proportions and functions that work. So there is no way of doing it bad when you do it like that. There is no way of hiding. And I put this image specifically, and I will tell you why. There is a lot of confusion between concept 3D artists and 3D artists online. Many people think that I do just 3D, especially people that are not in the industry. So this slide is definitely describing that. 3D concept artist creates and designs from scratch and a blank piece of paper a functionable design. So something new, something fresh. In my case, it can be spaceship, weapon, rifle, all the whole world, as I did in Inside 44. And I use 3D to deliver it to my clients, so then a 3D artist can take it and optimize it. The lower picture shows you how optimization works. I specifically overcrowded it like this for this specific project, so I can show it. Is that you need to optimize the 3D art to work in engines. This one would work in VFX, even though it has a little bit too many polys. For gaming, it's a bit different, and that's what 3D artists do. My designs cut time of production by 80% and the budget by 80% they get for them because I give them high polys. And I don't care about the geometry. In my case, the upper geometry is completely broken, and they would do the lower geometry for me. So I hope that clarifies the difference. And eventually we had renders like this. There is multiple assets in Inside 44, and there is, each character of course has a weapon, because science fiction stories always have weapons in most of the cases. And I like to say there is no cool story without a cool weapon or a spaceship. So now that we have arrived to the vehicles, We went through asset characters that I designed. There is plenty of them in Insight 44. If you decide to go and buy the books and support this project, you can go on a link in this video. Let's talk about vehicles. To design vehicles, I had to analyze the story arc I wrote, what does the scene tell, and the function of the vehicle that can support that scene. And then eventually all of this will give a style and we will get a vehicle. Let's see R1 car. R1 car is the key component of this story because first part of the book, Matthew is racing in that part. And it's 1/3 of the book. And it's a key art that is a hero asset, so it had to be very detailed and crafted in 3D. It also had to support the full racing system and to work with all the gadgets I designed. It had to have futurism but with a twist. It's really hard to do a new car, but I managed to do it. This was his initial sketch of Matthew's car from the side view. I extended the body, and if you check, the lines are very unorthodox to car, much more pulling down and much more pulling to the front, which is completely different from the cars that we know. I used this accident balance that I already mentioned you to do that. And immediately when I saw the shapes back then in ZBrush, which I used for that, I knew that I was onto something. It was fresh, it was new. I want to tell you about specific thing that I do, and that's called three-line flow when I'm designing everything. Every object is described by 3 lines. So which 3 lines are describing this object? On cars, mostly greenhouse is the first one that describes. But you will see that I did something very specific. In the middle here, I carved it out, but this surface is connecting to the front surface and it's pulling your view from the front all the way back. The second line that defines this car is the side line, and this side line is gently flowing from the back to the front, leading you to the cockpit. And specifically I put this dot here so you can stretch the surface and tell you where to look. If these only 2 lines stayed here, it would be a bad design because it would be broken. So I had to make a balance. I put a 3rd line in between, literally with a shape in the back, and it will lead your eye to have a balance. So every design with only 3 lines needs to be balanced. You decide which ones and you work around them. So eventually we had a design like this that was fixed by Kaloyan Vasiliev. He fixed it in 3D over my 3D and we got a toy. And I'm very grateful for that. The final design. Very futuristic, very unusual, very science fiction, and the main character races it in Insight 44. Let's talk about one more design. This time let's go a little bit deeper so you know how much it takes to design these kind of things to world build. Every time I design a vehicle, I start with initial idea in 3D. That initial idea in 3D gives me the proportions that I told you about. 3D is great for initial ideas because you can't cheat with it. If you cheat with it, you already failed. But like this, you can position all the elements and get a cool idea and design and proportion. Later I would sketch over it. When I sketch over it, I start to model. And it's literally back and forth process, where I'm constantly thinking about the story, about design, about function, about styling, about everything. And as you see, the details are slowly building up. We are getting more and more of them until we get... I'm a big proponent of using 3D and 2D and combining them together because they give the best results. As you can see, 3D base, 2D sketch, final design. Very cool, very manageable, and very easy to do. And eventually we had final design like this, the interplanetary system that would check the new planets. So now that we have talked about characters, assets, designs, and everything that's inside 44, I was ready to do the scenes. Everything was logistically prepared for this moment. After 7 years of work, I had everything that's inside the book, and it was time to tell the story. The story arc that was written What does that scene tell? Is it a 3D or 2D asset to show it? Best camera angle, lighting, and rendering done. Let's talk about racing scene in Nambia. It's a part of story that shows how the racing looks like, and for the first time you see it in Nambia. The scene visually demonstrates how fast, agile, and space-oriented this race is. We needed cars, racing rings, VIP cocoons, public areas, fences, terrains. And there is one trick about racing. You always, either too high or too low, you position the camera at the right angle, and it gives the view of the speed. So let's see how the scene was developed and how we got that. As I said, these were the rings that were designed, the Darmar car that you saw, all together combined created a scene. We did the characters and everything that were watching it. So we were showing the racing. I chose the camera position, and because I had a lot of scenes like this, I needed to render them basic like this. But that wasn't the problem. Some scenes were much complex. This was less complex because I would sketch over it, and that would give me the final result that would work. After all, the first book has around 200 for illustrations telling the story. And eventually we had a final result like this. Many scenes in Inside 44, you can all check them out. These scenes are different ones, Mars Earth's war, or the racing that still tells it. There is a lot of scenes inside of the story, and each of them represents a different kind of approach, different kind of design. When I published the first book, I realized that I was missing one thing, and that one thing was architecture of this world. I had scenes, I had assets, I had everything, but there was missing the architecture of the world. So when you open the book, you feel through which cities you are going through, to which planets you are, to which countries you are in. I use story arc to define them, environment influence, species evolution, infrastructure, and monument. Let's see that how it worked for the Moon Parliament. Moon dwellers separated from humans 200 years ago and have since adapted to life on Moon. They were shaped by Moon's low gravity, thin atmosphere, bare terrain, and cannot sustain natural food production. Their eyes, skins, lungs have evolved to withstand low gravity, radiation, and thin air. Food supply through controlled delivery systems, and so on. So they were forced to build a glass domes filled with artificial air so they can survive. And their body changed. Also, they are very loyal to the Maximiliana. Her statue is in the center of most of the places because she was the builder and they chose a peaceful philosophy. Eventually, how did that look? I said to myself, okay, let's use the assets we have from the Moon, their Moon ship carrier. And I said, I want Parliament. This is Maximiliana that also appears in the book, in the story. The Parliament had to be connected with glass domes. They come with the trains. Eventually we had a design like this. From everywhere you can come to it, also with a spaceship. Maximiliana is a central figure. And their Parliament is levitating a little bit above the whole planet. And I said, let's try a new style, because I wanted to separate architecture from the scenes you saw. So we got this flat shade setting, which I loved, and eventually this is a cover of the first book, the Inside 44 universe. There are many architectures like this in the book, like Mars Parliament, Babylon Parliament, and when you open the book you can literally enter this science fiction world. Okay, first I need to say, if you have decided to get the book, please go on the link in the description. And the second is that I will talk now about the branding. Very short, but enough so we can combine this world building that I did over a decade. Jeff Bezos said one of the best sentences about it. Your brand is what other people say about you when you are not in their own. Many artists struggle with this, many writers struggle with this, many designers, because they try to say what I want to tell. And then they tell the story. And the public responds completely different. So you go to the public always. Public is the people that give you the feedback. If they say it's different, you go back and fix it. It's a process, back, forward, back, forward. It bruises ego a lot, but that's the only way to become successful and to make a good project. Because when they come back, until you get the green arrow where they are saying what you wanted, and this can of course adapt, but sometimes public is much smarter than you. You're not ready until you get that. So keep that in mind. An artist who can't listen won't be heard. I have seen this multiple times on social media, in real life. So you need to listen. Hear your public, hear the world, and it will hear you. My brand had to be futuristic, Darmar, a Bible of art representing Serbia, fresh, bold, unapologetic science fiction, and massive in scale. I don't know if I succeeded on that. You will tell me in comments. If I have, please comment. And the last part of this, as I said, there are 3 parts. The last part of this is book arrangement and self-publishing, marketing and presenting Serbia. And I will explain you why. Book arrangement. Book arrangement was the hardest thing of this project. All that you can see on this screen was in SCIFI. Story, illustration, characters, backstories, vehicles, assets, planets, maps, architecture, Serbia, brand. All of this combined was 8 to 9 years of building, and all of it had to go in a books and to talk with each other. It's the hardest thing I have done in my life. I have done this for more than 3 years, so each page can talk with another. And I always say to people who want to world build and create a big map on your wall, but not only that, use simple pen and take your time, because this process is one of the hardest processes you will ever experience to make something work on this level. As I said, in an era of monitors, tablets, mobile phones, it's great to use a pen because it views outside those monitors and it gives you perspective. There is a big elephant in this room, it's called AI. Everybody's talking about it. Great art, guys, takes time. It doesn't matter that AI is speeding because it's giving mediocre, low-level quality of art. If it ever gives the quality of art that we do and design, then I would use it. But currently, I'm getting much better results, as you can see from all of this. Which means that what will happen with AI, I don't know, but something tells me that it's slowly stopping. Also, one thing for all the artists, world builders, designers, writers, AI creates decision making really hard because your brain starts to become fatigued from too much information. Also, you're not using those pathways anymore in your brain. You stop knowing how to do it. I will give you an example. Do you use ChatGPT? You probably do, or Gemini, it doesn't matter. But you fix your emails. Have you realized that your emails and you can't write them anymore? You are starting to create yourself problems because you can't write an email anymore because your brain is slowly starting to slow down. And all of this, as I said, is making a huge problems. So, when I'm talking about the work in this part of organizing everything to work, it's similar to a design. When you get to the stage where there is a lot of complex details on 3D model, you're moving everything and so on, fixing, I often suggest to people to work 30% of their daytime, to work 2 hours of work a day, that's max. By the way, one fascinating thing is that people can do deep work maximum 4 hours a day. I'm talking about not touching anything except for 2 hours of work and relax 70%, because if you do more than that, it will completely destroy your brain, like it did to mine, and the recovery won't be possible. When you don't have recovery, there is no possibility of working better. This working 30%, 2 hours of work a day in that stage would give much better results and 10 times more of work than doing it more than that. Eventually, the idea was to have 3 books, 200 pages each. After years, months and months of anxiety, which was very hard, we get to 3 books. Total 600 pages. I separated it in SCIFI characters, SCIFI story, and SCIFI vehicles. This is happening in 2024. And I said that I will post it on Kickstarter, and there was a problem. Because from Serbia you can do a Kickstarter. And I announced the date, 4/4/2025, and had no idea how hard this was going to be. We don't have Stripe, we don't have Kickstarter, so it didn't happen. One of the saddest things, to be honest, about this project, because I know that it would kill the Kickstarter. It would do incredible, but destiny wasn't that for Inside 44. So let's talk about logistics. From Serbia, to be exact, self-publishing. This is the route I had to go, and it took 8 months of my life just to figure out how I'm gonna get the payments. So you can ship from Serbia. By the way, this slide is to tell you that many of you are very lucky to be in the countries you are. Because when it comes to sales, there is a whole system and the devil is in the detail, and detail is very important. So you can ship from Serbia the books. Why? Because our shipment is 4 to 5 times higher than EU. So for where I would pay in EU 25 bucks, I would pay 100 bucks from Serbia. You can sell from Serbia. Why? Because until 2 months ago, believe it or not, 2 months ago, system changed. We got SEPA and payments. You had to sell in the local currency. This is 2025 we are talking about. So if you work B2B, you can get the money normally like anywhere in the world, but if you're selling a product, that's a different story. So I had to figure out how I'm gonna do this. I had to do it print on demand, which of course increased the price. I can't sell, so I had to make a payment processor that would take the money, which takes 10%. And I paid incredible amounts of money to find a way, and nobody knew from the experts in Serbia how to do it, which also increased the price. And eventually, when I figured it out after months of research, the biggest problem is that everything was manual. So when you click the button, in the rest of the world, you get the payment, everything goes here, 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 everything had to be done manual. As I said, this is the logline. A rising intergalactic racer destroyed by sabotage is forced to rebuild and step into a conflict far bigger than himself. And many of these images represent Balkan and Serbia. And I always say, why is this important? It's important because I always say to artists and designers, when I started to do it in a way where I represent my Balkan people and Serbia, many people were very skeptic. But then when you look at the history of Balkan and the conflicts and everything, it was a genius material because it was totally fresh and new that wasn't seen in the world. Fresh energy is something great, and if you want to be different, you just go in a different route. Of course, it takes more energy, knowledge, and so on, but it's worth it. And you will see many symbols from my country and from the Balkan, and eventually you would get a full universe science fiction level called Inside 44. And the main characters, Tiny, Eddie the Snail, Tamara, Darmar, the main protagonists against the others, which you can read inside of the book. And eventually the book was published 2025, did really good because it had a price of $200 plus, which was very high price even though it was 600 pages. But it sold really good and I'm very grateful for everybody who got it. And in 2026, it was after the systems and everything and a lot of struggle, the price is reduced to $114, $44 if you decide to get it. It's 2 books or 3 books, or you can get the separate books which cost $49. This is all hardcover. These are some of the pages. And here is the video how the book looks, but I'm not gonna show you because there is a new. I will cut it here. My apologies. As you can see, it's a huge book. This is 2025 edition, so let's move. My apologies. After everything that happened, the payment shipment system didn't work. So into 2026, everything was optimized. The industry collapsed, which was a big hit also for Inside 44, but we managed to go through. What is the future for Inside 44? The future depends from the people, and it's definitely uncertain. The project is standing on my website. It can be ordered there, inside44.com, inside/44.com. And it all depends on the people who will support this project. The more people support it, the more it will grow. So world building is a very complex thing. Thank you for listening. This is a story of a decade how I created Inside 44. I'm very grateful for everything, and thank you for watching the video. I hope you have seen the magnitude and the size of this project and learned something that you can use when creating your project. My name is Darko Markovic Darmar. If you decide to get a book, this is the website, this is the QR code. Any support means a lot, and thank you for listening. Good luck with your projects, world building, or science fiction that you like.